Hello, and thank you for joining us. A federal judge is calling out the Trump administration for, quote, willful disregard of his court orders. Judge James Boasberg of the D.C. District Court said Wednesday there is probable cause to find the Trump administration in criminal contempt for defying his order to turn around flights that were involved in deportations under a wartime law known as the Alien Enemies Act.
Okay, so I need you to really hear me on this one, because what just happened in a federal courtroom is absolutely insane, and almost nobody is talking about it the right way. Like, this is one of those stories where the headline doesn't even come close to capturing how big this actually is. And I'm sitting here wondering why every single news network isn't leading with this, because it's a massive deal for Trump's entire administration and the people working inside it right now. You know how Trump's whole thing is that he always wins and he never backs down and the courts can't touch him? That's been his whole brand for years now. The idea that no matter what happens in the legal system, he somehow comes out on top, or at least delays everything long enough that people forget about it. Well, a federal judge just looked at that attitude and said, actually, no, I'm coming for your people. And this isn't some random district court judge making noise to get attention or score political points with the media. This is Judge James Boasberg, who happens to be the chief judge of the D.C. District Court, and he just restarted a criminal contempt investigation into Trump administration officials over those secretive deportation flights to El Salvador that have been in the news for months now. But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest, you can't really trust mainstream media anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join. And if you just want to support what we're doing, join us. Be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right, let's get back to the video.
A judge says there is probable cause to hold the Trump administration in contempt. This is in regards to the case of deporting Venezuelan migrants, despite that judge's order in his court to turn the plane around. CNN chief legal correspondent Paula Reed joins me now. Paula, what exactly is the judge saying?
Look, Dana, this is huge. We've been waiting for this opinion. Now, the judge here is still deciding punishment and the next steps. He is giving the Justice Department a chance to weigh in here. But this case, this question has, as you know, become a political flashpoint. President Trump has repeatedly attacked this judge, James Boasberg, even calling for him to be impeached.
Let me say that again because it's important, and I need you to understand the weight of what I just said. Criminal, contempt, investigation. We're not talking about a slap on the wrist here. We're not talking about a strongly worded letter that gets filed away and forgotten. We're not talking about the kind of legal wrangling that drags on forever and never amounts to anything real. We're talking about the kind of legal action that could put senior Trump officials in actual legal jeopardy. The kind where people start hiring personal defense attorneys and worrying about their own futures. And here's the part that makes this absolutely wild and honestly kind of unbelievable when you think about it. This whole thing is happening because Trump's team thought they could just ignore a court order and then argue about it later like nothing happened. Come on, are you kidding me right now? That's like running a red light and getting caught on camera and then telling the cop, well, actually, Your Honor, I interpreted that light as more of an orange, so technically I didn't do anything wrong. It doesn't work like that in the real world, and Judge Boasberg is making absolutely sure everyone understands it doesn't work like that in his courtroom either. So what happened exactly? Let me give you the quick version, and then we're going to dive deep into all the details you need to understand. Back in the spring, Boasberg issued an emergency order that was supposed to stop the rapid deportation of Venezuelan migrants under something called the Alien Enemies Act. The whole point of the order was to give these people a chance to challenge their deportations in court, due process. That thing we're supposed to care about as a country that follows the rule of law. But here's what Trump's team did instead, and this is where it gets crazy. They kept flying people out anyway, secretly, to a high-security facility in El Salvador, while the judge's order was supposedly in effect and binding on the administration. And when they got called out on it, their defense was basically, well, we didn't think the order really applied to us and we interpreted it differently, so we didn't do anything wrong. Can you believe this? Judge Boasberg looked at that argument and found probable cause for criminal contempt. Probable cause. That's the same standard police need to arrest someone for a crime. And now, after months of appeals and jurisdictional fights, the D.C. Circuit has cleared him to move forward with a full investigation into what happened and who was responsible. This is huge, and the timing couldn't be worse for Trump because this is happening right as his administration is pushing even harder on immigration with new restrictions and policies that are generating lawsuits all over the country. They just paused all asylum decisions nationwide, and they're talking about permanently stopping migration from certain countries. So the same hardline push it to the limit approach that got them into this contempt mess in the first place, They're doubling down on it right now, even while a federal judge is breathing down their necks and preparing to investigate their people. All right, so let's really get into this because I think most people are missing the bigger picture here, and there's a lot of context you need to understand why this case matters so much. You see a headline like, "Judge investigates Trump officials for contempt," and you might think, okay, another legal fight because Trump's always in court and nothing ever happens anyway, so why should I care about this one? But this is different, and I need you to understand exactly why it's different from all the other legal battles we've seen over the years, because the stakes here are real and the consequences could actually affect people's lives and careers. First, let's talk about what contempt of court actually means, because there's a huge difference between civil contempt and criminal contempt, and most people don't realize how significant that distinction really is. Civil contempt is basically the court saying, hey, you need to comply with my order, and if you don't, I'm going to fine you or hold you until you do comply. It's about forcing compliance and getting people to follow the rules going forward. Criminal contempt is way more serious, and that's what we're dealing with here. It's punishment. It's the court saying you violated my order, and now there are going to be consequences for what you did, potentially including jail time for the people who made the decisions that led to the violation. And guess which one Judge Boasberg is pursuing? Yeah, the criminal one, which tells you everything you need to know about how seriously he's taking this situation and how confident he is that real violations occurred. Now, here's where Trump's legal strategy completely backfired, and this is so important to understand because it shows how the administration's approach to the courts has created serious problems for itself. When Boasberg first issued his order back in the spring, it was supposed to temporarily halt deportation flights so that migrants could have their day in court before being sent to another country. Pretty straightforward, right? The judge said stop and let these people make their legal arguments before you remove them permanently. But Trump's team decided to interpret that order, let's say creatively, in a way that allowed them to keep doing what they wanted to do. They basically said, well, the order wasn't specific enough, and we didn't think it applied to flights that were already in progress, and we thought we had wiggle room to continue operations. And they kept flying people out to El Salvador to a facility called CECOT, which is this notorious mega prison that's been criticized by human rights groups around the world for its conditions and treatment of detainees. So when the case came back before Boasberg and he saw what happened while his order was supposedly in effect, he was not amused, and that's putting it mildly. In his April opinion, he made clear that under the Constitution, parties must obey court orders unless an appellate court changes them. Period. End of story. You don't get to decide for yourself what the order means, and you don't get to interpret it in whatever way is most convenient for you to keep doing what you wanted to do anyway. And he specifically rejected the government's suggestion that they had room to interpret his earlier ruling loosely. That's judge speak for, nice try. I see what you did there, and I'm not having it in my courtroom. Now here's where it gets really interesting and where the administration's problems started piling up even more. After Boasberg found probable cause for criminal contempt, the administration tried to get the case moved out of his court entirely. They argued about jurisdiction and whether he even had the authority to pursue this. They appealed to the D.C. Circuit. They did everything they could to slow this down and make it go away before it could cause real damage to anyone in the administration. And for months it worked. The investigation was frozen while the D.C. Circuit sorted out all the procedural questions about who had authority over what. But just this week, on November 18th and 19th, Boasberg announced he's moving forward because the appeals court cleared the path and removed the obstacles that had been blocking him. And now he can do everything he needs to do to get to the bottom of what happened. He can compel testimony from current and former officials. He can subpoena documents, including flight logs and internal emails. He can figure out exactly who knew what and when they knew it and what decisions were made at every level of the process. And this is the part that should make Trump's inner circle very nervous, because criminal contempt isn't just about abstract government policy or institutional questions. It's about individual people making individual decisions and being held accountable for those decisions. If Boasberg finds that specific officials knowingly violated his order, those specific officials could face real legal consequences that follow them for the rest of their careers. We're talking about potential sanctions and potential criminal referrals, the kind of stuff that ends careers and creates permanent legal problems for people who thought they were just doing their jobs. And look, I know what some people are thinking right now. They're thinking, well, Trump will just pardon everyone who gets in trouble, or the DOJ won't prosecute anyone from the administration, or somehow this will all go away like so many other legal challenges have gone away before. Maybe, we'll see how it plays out, but that misses the point entirely. The point is that a federal judge is on record saying that this administration crossed the line and violated a court order, and he has probable cause to believe it rises to the level of criminal contempt. That's not nothing. That's a very big deal. And it's happening at the exact moment when Trump is pushing his immigration agenda harder than ever before. Just this week, the administration halted all asylum decisions nationwide, citing a shooting incident involving National Guard members as justification for the sweeping policy change. And Trump went on social media talking about permanently pausing migration from what he called poor nations, doubling down on the hardline approach even while facing this contempt investigation. So the pattern is clear, right? Push everything to the absolute limit. Dare the courts to stop you. And if they do, argue about it and keep pushing anyway, like the rules don't apply to you. But here's what I think the administration is missing and what could come back to bite them in a serious way. Judges have long memories, and they talk to each other and they pay attention to patterns. When you show a pattern of ignoring or trying to get around court orders, judges start to lose patience and they start looking for ways to send a message that they will not be ignored. Boasberg isn't the only judge who's been watching this administration's approach to the courts. Federal judges across the country have been dealing with aggressive legal tactics and creative interpretations of their orders. And some of them, like Boasberg, are starting to push back harder than we've seen before. This contempt case is a warning shot. It's the judiciary saying, actually, no, you can't just do whatever you want and then argue about it later. There are rules and there are limits, and we're going to enforce them even when it's politically difficult. Okay, so let's break this down into the key points you need to understand, because this story is complicated, and I want to make sure you walk away knowing exactly what's happening and why it matters for the country going forward. There's a lot of noise around immigration and Trump and the courts, but this case is really about something more fundamental than any specific policy. Point number one. This isn't about immigration policy in general, and that's important to understand right from the start. This is about whether the administration obeyed a specific court order that was legally binding on them. A lot of people are going to try to make this about whether you support deportations or not, and whether you think the Alien Enemies Act is a good law, and whether you agree with Trump's overall immigration agenda. But that's not what this contempt case is about at all. The contempt case is about one simple question. Did the administration comply with Judge Boasberg's order or not? That's it. That's the whole question. And Boasberg has already answered that question with his preliminary finding. He found probable cause to believe they didn't comply and that they kept flying people out when they weren't supposed to. So whatever you think about immigration, the rule of law question is separate and stands on its own. And on that question, the judge has already made his preliminary finding, and it's not good for the administration. Point number two. Criminal contempt is a serious legal tool, and Boasberg is using it for a very specific reason that tells you how he views this situation. Judges don't throw around criminal contempt lightly because it's a big deal that requires a lot of evidence and can result in real penalties for real people. So when Boasberg decided to pursue this path instead of just issuing fines or moving on, he was making a statement about what he believes happened. He was saying this isn't just a minor disagreement about how to interpret an order or a good faith misunderstanding between lawyers. This is willful defiance of a court order, and it needs to be treated seriously by everyone involved. The fact that he's moving forward now after months of appeals and delays tells you he's committed to seeing this through. He's not going to let this case die quietly or get buried under procedural arguments. Point number three. The administration's legal strategy actually made things worse for themselves, and this is the part I find almost funny in a dark sort of way. Because they had options, right? When Boasberg issued his original order, they could have complied with it. They could have waited for a ruling from the appeals court before taking any more action. They could have negotiated with the court about how to implement the order in a way that worked for everyone. Instead, they basically said, "We don't think this order means what you think it means," and kept doing what they were doing anyway as if nothing had happened. And now Boasberg is using their own arguments against them in the contempt proceedings. He's saying, you knew there was an order. You chose to interpret it in a way that let you keep flying people out. And that interpretation was wrong. It's like they handed him the evidence he needed to make the contempt case against them. Point number four. This connects to a bigger pattern that we've been watching for years now, and that pattern matters for understanding where this is all heading. Trump has been fighting with courts since day one of his first term back in 2017. The travel ban got blocked, family separation got challenged, the border wall funding fights went all the way to the Supreme Court, and now in his second term, the same pattern is playing out all over again. Push the limits, get sued, fight in court, push the limits again. But what's different now is that judges are running out of patience because they've seen this playbook before and they know how it works. Some of them, like Boasberg, are sending a message that there will be consequences for ignoring their orders. Point number five. We don't know yet how this ends, but it matters regardless of the outcome, and here's why I think that's true. I want to be honest with you. I don't know if this contempt investigation is going to result in anyone actually facing criminal charges. The legal process is long and complicated, and there are still appeals and arguments and procedural fights ahead that could take months or even years to resolve. But here's why I think it matters, even if we don't see anyone in handcuffs at the end of this. It matters because it creates a permanent legal record. A federal judge has now found probable cause that this administration violated a court order in a way that rises to criminal contempt, and that finding is on the books forever no matter what happens next. It matters because it creates political pressure that the administration has to deal with going forward. Every time they push another aggressive immigration policy, opponents can point to this case and say, see, they don't respect the courts. They think they're above the law. And it matters because it might actually change behavior inside the administration, even if Trump himself never changes course. Not Trump's behavior. He's going to do what he's going to do no matter what any judge says. But maybe the behavior of the officials around him who have to actually implement these policies will change. The ones who might now be thinking, wait, am I personally going to be on the hook if this goes sideways? That's the part that could really matter in practice. Because Trump can give orders all day long, but he needs people willing to carry them out. And if those people start getting nervous about their own legal exposure, things could get very complicated very quickly. So where does this leave us right now? Look, I'm not going to pretend I have all the answers because this is a developing story and a lot can change in the coming weeks and months. The appeals court could step in again with new rulings. The investigation could drag on for months or years before we see any real resolution. But here's what I know for sure right now. Judge Boasberg is not playing around with this case. He found probable cause for criminal contempt against administration officials. He's moving forward with a full investigation that has real legal teeth. And he has the power to compel testimony and documents from the people who made this happen. That's a real legal threat to real people, not just the administration as an abstract entity, but individual officials who might have knowingly violated a federal court order. And it's happening right now while the administration is pushing even harder on immigration and halting asylum decisions and talking about permanent migration freezes. The collision between this administration and the courts is accelerating faster than ever before. And this contempt case might just be the first place where we see real consequences for crossing the line. Keep watching because this story is far from over and there are going to be major developments in the coming weeks that everyone needs to know about. And you better believe I'm going to be here covering every single twist and turn as it happens. So make sure you're subscribed and hit that notification bell because when the next shoe drops in this case, you're going to want to know about it immediately. I'll see you in the next one.